Good morning, film students. We're going to start today our unit on science fiction films. Seems like an appropriate day, May 4th, to start our unit on science fiction. And typically, when I start the unit with the students on science fiction, we watch this documentary, which is this week's assignment. It's a documentary called Jodorowsky's Dune, about the greatest film that never got made. A lot of filmmakers over the course of film history have had incredible ideas that have gotten through various stages of development and design and conception only to have something occur. So, I'd like for you to watch the documentary available on this link. It's about an hour and a half, so that will be this week's lesson. Watch the documentary and then answer these 5 questions. Please discuss any messages that Alejandro Jodorowsky, the Chilean filmmaker and artist, avant-garde stage producer and director and creator, what messages did he want to convey to his audience through Dune? Dune has influenced so very many science fiction authors, not just science fiction, but authors as a whole. It's one of the very first science fiction novels to be considered not just a science fiction novel, but a work of literary magnificence. It was written by Frank Herbert in the 1960s. And for those of you who have studied American history during the 1960s, you know it was a very turbulent period that had a variety of events and developments that changed the fabric of the nation and what it stood for and what was occurring in it at that time. The counterculture movement sort of found a new voice through the work of Frank Herbert. And so what is it that Jodorowsky, when he attempts to recreate Dune from a page in a book to images on a screen? Then, spoilers, the film never got made. So explain Jodorowsky's reaction to watching another filmmaker's version of Dune. One of the things that happens in the film is it explains how all the work that was put into Dune ultimately fails to accomplish an actual film, but that the studio eventually goes with another filmmaker and makes Dune. Alejandro and his son in the film see or discuss their reaction to seeing that film. So what was that reaction? It's a really fun part of the documentary. And then which films does the documentary explain that Jodorowsky's sadly never made Dune influence? What's interesting is that despite the fact that this film wasn't made, it became so famous, its designs so impactful, that other films that came after it were influenced by it. So what were those films that were influenced by it? Among the many people that Alejandro Jodorowsky was able to hire to take part in his film were surrealist artist Salvador Dali. If you have not seen Salvador Dali's work, put it in the Google machine and prepare to have your eyes melt at what this man did, and our friend Orson Welles, both of them, he hires them to be in the film. How do you get such incredible talents to say, okay, we'll be in your movie? Jodorowsky found a way. And then, bonus, and I'll give you double credit if you do this, because typically we spend a lot of time discussing in class the development of the different genres. We go over different creators that had an influence on the unfolding of the genre. And we can't do that here um, by showing you the exact documentaries and films and clips that I could have shown you in class, because so much of that stuff is copyrighted and unavailable for free. I was able to find this one. So I'll put, for double credit, do a little bit of research, explain the origin and evolution of science fiction in literature and film, noting at least 5 major authors and filmmakers involved throughout the 20th century. Science fiction is a genre that didn't begin in the 20th century, but is definitely a hallmark of what the 20th century was. You have to understand so much about the 20th century is that the human race advanced more in the 20th century than it had potentially in all of its previous history. And so many of those advances were reliant upon scientific discoveries, engineering, marvels, things of that nature. Well, when people try to explain their surroundings, they often, as you're aware, try to contextualize it within imagination. What is it that was occurring throughout the 20th century that sparked people's imagination in order to envision a different future? Remember that the tenets of science fiction are sort of divided into a few categories: visions of the future, what people think is going to happen, what it'll look like, how people will react in it; visitors from other parts of the universe or other parts of the timeline, advances in technology and how those advances in technology affect people. You'll find that science fiction isn't just singular. You know, if we say a crime film, well, it's a crime film. It's about crime. If we say a Western, well, it's set in this setting, this location, the frontier, the untamed wilderness, right? That's a Western. But a science fiction film can be set in the present, in the future. A science fiction film can relate to so many different elements, which makes science fiction sort of unique. All right, so let's give some shout outs to the people who last week, or at our last update, made themselves known. Thank you, Carissa. Thank you, Emily. Thank you, Jacqueline. Thank you, Miguel. Thank you, Rhiannon. Thank you, Samantha. Thank you, Matthew. Thank you, Alvaro. Thank you, Anthony. And thank you, Janine. Last week, you responded to this podcast, and I must say that so many of your comments were absolutely outstanding. And we can't be together in a classroom physically, but we can be together virtually in this classroom. So I really hope One, that you're listening, because some of your responses, I'm not sure if you actually listened to the whole thing or you just looked at these questions and say, let me see if I can make up an answer. Um, Make sure that you're referencing the podcast. And then when it comes to the film, make sure that you reference the film. I've also got a little bit of a puzzle for you this week to to look at, and I'll link it right over here in the update. I hope you're well. Please stay safe. Please stay healthy. Please stay creative. Please stay active. And may the 4th be with you.